It's pretty well known by now that in 2016, J.D. Vance was not a big fan of Donald Trump. But as it turns out, Vance was not a big fan in 2020, at least on economic policy. So this is pretty interesting. This is from the Washington Post. They have an article on some private texts that they obtained from Vance talking about Trump, saying that he failed to deliver. And this was in February 2020. So the Washington Post writes, Vance has said watching former President Trump enact his populist agenda for left-behind Americans transformed him from a never-Trump conservative in 2016 to a Trump supporter in 2020. But he privately expressed a very different verdict on Trump as the former president's first term was nearing its end. Privately unreported messages obtained by the Washington Post show this. So I'm going to read the exact text. Quote, Trump has just so thoroughly failed to deliver on his economic populism, parentheses, accepting a disjointed China policy, end quote. And of course, he ended up being right about this, but he says that he predicted Joe Biden would win the 2020 election. So he was right about that. And this was in February 2020. In February 2020, 11 months before Trump's term came to an end. Did Trump all of a sudden turn up the populism like 200 notches or something in his last 11 months in office? I don't think so. I don't think that's the case. Unless he wanted to make the case that he was so pleased with Trump's policies on COVID and some of the stimulus spending. But if you think about what he's been saying on the campaign trail, he hasn't been singling that out as an example of Trump's populism. No, he just postures as a populist, clings on to some of this anti-immigrant sentiment. I think that's picking up a lot of steam lately. And it's picked up a lot of steam, particularly under Joe Biden. Let's face it, the pendulum is swinging to the right on immigration. I think there's no denying it, and we have to be honest with ourselves. But that doesn't stop cynical people like J.D. Vance from coming in and saying, hey, everyone, let's be mad at immigrants. Let's point fingers at those Haitians. And by the way, I don't have evidence for this, but they're eating cats. So that's his claim to fame for populism. But he's also got a claim to fame here for just being dishonest, changing his opinions, except not really, but basically just morphing, being a chameleon, just going with the flow. Oh, the right and the bulk of the right-wing movement is behind Trump. I'm going to be behind Trump now. In 2016, he felt cool being an anti-Trumper. In 2020, he privately was an anti-Trumper. And right now, like, who can really believe him? Who can believe a word that he says if he's willing to just basically sugarcoat everything that Trump does? And he knows that it's false. He knows that he's lying about Haitian migrants. And he knows that he's promoting falsehoods about Trump's economic policy. Trump was not a populist on economics. Let's be clear about that. I mean, his tax cut was primarily for the wealthy. It's set to expire in 2025 for the middle class and the poor. This is not a guy who, under any set of circumstances, can be considered an economic populist. And you know what? If you want to make the case for policies that aren't economically populist, that's fine. You can do that. But do not pretend to be someone that you're not. And that's exactly what J.D. Vance does. He tries to sugarcoat Trump, tries to paint him as a populist for being opposed to immigration, while ignoring all of his pro-corporate policies. The tax cuts, the deregulation, just generally giving the military-industrial complex, giving Wall Street everything that they wanted. This guy who purports to stand up for the working class is not being honest. He's not being straightforward. He is lying through his teeth. He's saying something different in private than he is in public. And who knows, maybe in 2028, we'll get some texts about J.D. Vance and what he's been saying about Trump now, and talking about how Trump actually isn't a populist and he's just riding along so that he can try and get political power. Because Trump is pretty darn old, he's pretty darn overweight, and he's going to be entering the most stressful job in the world again if he's reelected. So yeah, it's a pretty brazenly transparent attempt to get close to power, get into that vice president seat, so that if something happens, he can take over. This is a guy who's not driven by any sort of principle. He would defend Trump pretty much for anything nowadays. The Haitian migrant thing, even Vivek Ramaswamy couldn't defend that. So yeah, it's really humiliating. I can't imagine being in a spot of doing damage control for someone who's so clearly broken and so clearly against what you purport to stand for. But those are just my thoughts. Let me know if you disagree. Let me know if you think it's possible that J.D. Vance changed his opinion in the comments. The best that I could give him in terms of the benefit of the doubt is that he could say, well, I changed my mind. I realize that economic policy isn't the most important thing, or I think that if Trump gets reelected, he will be economically populist. But he's saying something different right now than he was privately in 2020. Now he's saying Trump was a populist. He was a populist conservative, and his policies did that. His policies showed him to be a populist and someone who fights for the working class. But in February 2020, 11 months before his term ends, he said something different. So yeah, let me know what you think. As always, if you liked the video, if you found it helpful or insightful, please leave a like, comment, or subscribe to the channel. I really do appreciate it. Let's get this channel growing up, get my subscribers up, so that more people can see these political takes, more people can get informed on the news of this election. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and I look forward to speaking to you in the next video.